Hey guys, Eugene here, and today I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about anti-inflammatory nutrition. Now, before we get into the actual talk as to nutrition, the first thing we need to be clear on is what inflammation actually is. Because inflammation is one of those words that gets thrown around a lot in this industry without people actually understanding what it means. So, a very, very simple definition of it is the immune system is activating. The immune system is turning on in response to something. For instance, if you're going for a run, you roll your ankle, you sprain a ligament, there's going to be a lot of pain, swelling, fluid retention, and heat in that area. That's an immune response, that is inflammation. That's going to send a lot of nutrients to heal that damaged ligament. If you're training in the gym, you're training biceps, you're creating a lot of little micro trauma and micro tears to your biceps. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to have some sort of inflammatory reaction afterwards, which is going to signal to your body you need to heal those biceps. You need to send nutrients there to grow them back bigger, stronger, more robust in general. If you get sick, you get some kind of infection, it's going to be the immune system that switches on and activates and is going to send and create a lot more immune cells to fight off whatever that invader is. So what we've got to understand is inflammation itself isn't good nor bad. It is just what it is. But now that we know what it is, we want to start being able to learn how to manage it so we can then direct it towards doing what we want it to do. Because the fact is, the body has a finite amount of resources. And the body's always going to be economical and efficient and focused on its first priority. So what I mean by that is, if it's given the choice between attacking and fighting off some kind of foreign bacteria or invader or poison that you've ingested, or it's going to direct those resources towards building you big bicep peaks, it's going to focus a lot more on the former, because that is an immediately threatening stimulus at the expense of your arms. So what we want to do is look at things in terms of our nutrition and managing any little source of inflammation that there may be, because in a sense that can be avoided, which means you can direct a lot more of your immune processes towards building muscle tissue, burning fat, building brain cells, repairing your DNA, repairing mitochondria and creating new mitochondria. All these things that are so important for vitality, for health, for performance, for life in general, we want to be focusing on that. We don't want to focus on the immune system having to unnecessarily clean up a lot of waste products that just shouldn't be in the bloodstream in the first place, if it was avoidable. Which is what brings us to nutrition. Now, as I get into nutrition, I do want to be clear that what I'm about to say, it can be a bit controversial, and at the same time, you don't necessarily have to follow everything. Is this all of it going to apply to you personally? No, it's definitely not. Do you need to worry about all this sort of stuff? No, you definitely do not. It all depends on your situation. If you're someone who's trying to optimize performance, if you're a professional athlete, if you're looking at increasing lifespan, if you're looking at just improving every little 1% aspect of your life and optimizing that, then it could be worthwhile. If you're somebody who's having a lot of issues with potentially inflammation being chronically switched on systemically through the body, maybe you got things like elevated triglycerides, elevated cholesterol, maybe you have really, really poor sleep, maybe you're constantly tired and lethargic, maybe you get a lot of seasonal allergies, constant drip or watery eyes, maybe you get some sort of skin irritation like a rash or something like that, maybe you have things like bloating and distension and constipation or diarrhea, any kind of digestive issues, maybe you have joint pain, or maybe it's as simple as saying you're not building muscle mass and you're not burning fat as quickly as you used to. Or in generally, day-to-day speaking, you just don't feel as good as you used to. You feel a lot more sluggish and run down. A lot of different symptoms there. Maybe you fall into one or two of those, maybe you fall into all of them. They are all potentially symptoms of an overly inflamed body, and particularly one that could be managed a little bit better through nutrition. So the first food we're going to be looking at is something called antifeedants. Now what I mean by this is, in nature, all living organisms have got one primary goal, and that is to survive and then procreate. So because of this, all animals have gone and evolved to have certain traits. Some have got large amounts of muscle mass, some are very, very quick, some have got large claws and talons, some have got spikes all over their back, others have got hardened shells. All of these traits have been uniquely evolved with over time to help that animal ward off any predator to survive. And at the same time, it's also helped that animal be able to find and seek out its prey so it can then eat, consume, flourish, and then procreate. Now, in a very, very, very same vein, plants work in a similar way. So Plants do want to survive, but they can't evolve to grow muscle mass. They can't run away, they can't fly away from their predators. So instead, what plants have done is they've evolved to have certain characteristics that we call antifeedants. That is, within the plant, they've gone and created their own pesticides and poisons that are designed to kill, or at least make very sick, whatever organism decides to go and eat that plant. The end goal being kill off or make sick whatever my predator is, so then I'm going to be able to flourish as a plant species. That's just basic survival. Now, the thing is, there are hundreds upon hundreds of these different antifeedants out there. You don't need to necessarily be worrying about all of them. The ones that we do know can have an effect on the human body are things like glycoalkaloids, lectins, phytates, and any enzyme inhibitors. So we're going to find these in a lot of different foods that we're commonly eating. So lectins and phytates and these enzyme inhibitors, for example, you're going to find them a lot in grains. You're going to find them a lot in nuts and a lot in seeds. You're going to find them in legumes. You're going to find things like the glycoalkaloids. You're going to find those in the nightshade family of vegetables. So you got things like capsicum, chili, if you use paprika. You're going to have in tomatoes, eggplants, and white potatoes. So what glycoalkaloids, lectins, phytates, what all these things do is they create damage to the intestinal wall, to that mucosal membrane that lines the gut, the digestive tract. When you create damage there, what's going to happen? You're going to stimulate the immune system. You're going to stimulate inflammation to send molecules there to clean up and fix up the damage. Not good. Now, we can't talk about the intestines and mucosal membranes without addressing gluten. Because gluten is one of those really controversial topics. Everybody has an opinion on it, especially with a lot of research coming out showing that you don't need to necessarily avoid gluten if you don't have celiac disease. Now, I personally believe that gluten is one of the most inflammatory foods out there because of a protein called zonulin. Now, before we get to that, we need to understand a little bit about how the digestive process works, how your body actually gets nutrients in. So what we've got here is a subsection of your intestinal wall, your small intestine. Externally down here, we have the bloodstream. And inside, above, is the inside of your intestines. So what happens is we eat food. Food passes into the small intestine. Now, that food then gets broken down into tiny particles by the digestive enzymes. Those tiny particles then get picked up by all of these little tiny protrusions living on the surface of the gut epithelial cells. These tiny little protrusions are like little fingers. They're called villi and microvilli. Now, their role is to pick up those tiny food particles from the intestines, pull it into the epithelial cell and into the bloodstream, where it can then be assimilated. So this is how the whole digestive process works. Body takes in food, it gets broken down and absorbed through here into the bloodstream. This is very, very tightly regulated. So what happens is if you have celiac disease, you get an erosion and a degradation and destruction of all those little protrusions to the point where you can no longer absorb food and nutrients properly, which is not good. However, what we've got to understand is if you don't have celiac disease, this is common to all people. What's going to happen when you have gluten is you're going to get an upregulation of the protein called zonulin. Now, what zonulin does is it regulates the space between each one of these epithelial cells. And what it does is it opens up the space and jacks everything wide open. Now, as I said before, this is all very, very tightly regulated. It's important to keep all the bad stuff that you don't want to be entering your bloodstream out of your body and allowing your body to filter and just take in the nutrients that it needs from the food. So if you have any bad bacteria, if you have any pathogens, if you have any poisons, if you have anything that's foreign that shouldn't be in your bloodstream, this membrane here is going to protect you from it leaching into your bloodstream. If this gets jacked way open because of zonulin, what you're going to experience is a lot of undigested food particles entering the bloodstream. You're going to have a lot of pathogenic bacteria, gram-negative bacteria passing into the bloodstream. And what can happen then is those things should not be in the bloodstream. You shouldn't have bits of undigested food circulating in your bloodstream. You shouldn't have certain strands of bacteria in your bloodstream as well. So what this does is it stimulates the immune system, and it creates this massive inflammatory response as the immune system tries to fight off whatever those invaders are. Now, if you have something called gram-negative bacteria living in the small intestine, which happens to a lot of people who follow a lot of high carbohydrate diets, or diets with low amounts of fiber, is you're going to get that gram-negative bacteria leaching into the bloodstream. Now, on the cell wall of this gram-negative bacteria is something called lipopolysaccharide, which is one of the most toxic products known to man, and it is a neurotoxin. So what's going to happen is this LPS enters the bloodstream and stimulates a crazy frenzy of inflammation. And all of this comes back to the expression of zonulin. So that for that reason alone, I try to avoid gluten as much as possible. So you can see how everything here is all linked together and how they all have different effects on inflammation overall. The question is, do I need to be avoiding all this stuff year round? Now, for me personally, I try to avoid gluten as much as possible. Nightshades I've tested, they work fine for me. I can handle those phytates and lectins from grains and nuts. Usually, typically it's okay, but it depends. The thing to understand is that all of these sources of inflammation are completely avoidable. You can't control it through the food that you put into your body. So if I was going through a more stressful time where I needed to focus on lowering inflammation, maybe I was training harder, going through a really hard training phase where I need to recover and focus on muscle mass more. Maybe I got sick. Maybe I'm not sleeping well. Maybe I'm working a lot more, under a lot more pressure with business and things like that, of that nature, where I know my recovery needs to be optimized. In those instances, I'll be looking at reducing all these inflammatory foods as much as possible. Outside of that, I wouldn't worry so much. So for you personally, you got to ask yourself, what kind of symptoms are you having? What is your current state of health? Are you going through a particularly hard diet phase? Maybe you're contest prepping. Maybe you just recently got injured. You're trying to fix up the injury as quickly as possible. In those instances, you want to be asking yourself, is there anything I can change in my nutrition to decrease my inflammatory load? And it's very, very well worth looking at things like lectins, phytates, the nightshade family, and of course, gluten. So I hope this clarifies a few things for you guys about inflammation and what it is and how to start modulating it with your food intake. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you guys are doing as well. So let me know your comments below, and I'll see you next time.